I just want to remind you that when Melina Mercouri made her appeal in 1982, everybody thought, oh yes, very good idea, right-thinking people. Oh yes, of course the marbles should go back. And what happened? Two people decided to do something about it, and that was the key. Because you have to have action, you have to have commitment to make things happen. And it was James and Eleni Cubitt who decided to set up a committee to campaign for the return of the marbles. And reunification of the marbles, which is now this worldwide global phenomenon, stems from that very important decision. But you must remember that through the 80s and the 90s, the going was very tough. It was not an easy campaign. As you know, many museums were very, very much opposed to the whole idea. And not only museums. However, they stuck at it. And under the presidency of Robert Browning, who was once my supervisor, I learned about the campaign for the return of the marbles at a very early stage. While I worked in Princeton, I followed it, and when I came back to England, I joined the committee, and I am a very deeply committed member, and I speak about this whenever I can, because I think it is a critical test of whether the British government and the British Museum can face up to their responsibilities.
I'm quite fortunate to be granted the opportunity to interview the late Christopher Hitchens, who's pictured here. In spring 2008, Christopher was in London promoting his book, a re-evaluation of the previously entitled The Elgin Marbles, Should They Be Returned to Greece, now renamed The Parthenon Marbles, The Case for Reunification. As he explained at the time, the purpose behind renaming the book was to give a new direction to this unique cause, as earlier requests to repatriate the sculptures had met with stubborn opposition. Put simply, the nub of the argument now was that the sculptures must be seen as a unified whole, as part of a continuous narrative in their original context. For example, one of the many impressive metopaes in the British Museum sees a Lapith lunging at a centaur. The heads of both are in Athens. In another metopee, a Lapith is rolled backwards over a water jar. Heads of both the centaur and the Lapith are in Athens. Christopher Hitchens deployed his extensive knowledge and reason to advance the Parthenon campaign. In his view, Greece's domestic and political position was irrelevant. This was a matter of principle.
But the relevance to the Parthenon marbles is we wish to immunize our campaign against the floodgates argument, because people do swallow it by saying that the argument for the Parthenon marbles is unique. The Parthenon is a fixed monument on that UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's possibly the most iconic and recognizable of all UNESCO World Heritage Sites. UNESCO uses it as an icon itself, an emblem itself. Onus has to be, the onus of justification has to be on those who don't support the reunification of this great monument. And if the marbles were brought together with the other halves, and in some cases, as this informed audience would know, they are other halves, pieces of the same block, half in Athens, half in London. This would not open any floodgates, because there cannot be any similar examples of a UNESCO World Heritage fixed monument so defaced and so unreunified. Therefore, to reunify the marbles would not open any floodgates, because there's not a lot of precedent which it could set. That's why I'm taking a long time to stress that the British Committee, whilst it acknowledges general campaigns for restitution, is very limited and ascetic in its demand for the reunification of the sculptures which belong to the Parthenon. Parthenon Gallery in the Acropolis Museum is the one place on earth where it is possible to have a single visual and aesthetic experience simultaneously of the Parthenon and its sculptures. And many people here will have had this experience I've had. You can sit and you can look at all three elements, metopes, pediments, frieze, and see the Parthenon in the background as well. That's the best you'll ever get, and there's only one place on earth where that can happen.
It goes without saying in the present company that the Parthenon marbles, as they are presently displayed in London, make a mockery of the British Museum's claim to coherent educational purpose. The contrast between the Duveen galleries and the Parthenon Gallery in the New Acropolis Museum in Athens is enough to reduce one to tears. I do believe museums will increasingly have to listen to what their public say and to act upon it. Changes in thinking and approach are also happening. One of my major criticisms of the British Museum's custodianship of the Parthenon marbles has been directed at its willful rewriting of the marble's architectural and thus cultural significance. Mr. McGregor, you can put an end to this embarrassment. Do the right thing. Heed the words of Christopher Hitchens. Cover yourself in glory, Neil. Return the marbles now.
Arguments about ownership are somewhat sterile. I think they're dangerous. I think a court case could significantly put back the case, the political and cultural case, if it were to fail, which I think is likely. But there's more than one way of skinning a cat. And I think legislative change could be effected if there's a political will to do it.
We are involved in a campaign. It may well be that the McGregors of this world, or those that think like him, say, well, Greece is in a very sad state. They can do nothing. They don't understand Greek history. The number of occasions Greece was practically burned down, but rose like a phoenix. And we are confident that it will happen again.